Marcus Williams pushed his cart down the long hallway of the Riverside Conservatory of Music. The wheels made a soft squeaking sound on the polished floor. It was 11:30 at night and the building was quiet now. All the students had gone home hours ago. The teachers had left too. Only Marcus remained, working his night shift as the custodian. He had been doing this job for 7 years now. 7 long years of cleaning classrooms, emptying trash cans and mopping floors. 7 years of being invisible to almost everyone who walked these halls during the day. Students rushed past him without a glance. Teachers barely nodded when they saw him. To them, he was just the cleaning man. Nothing more. Marcus did not mind being invisible most of the time. It made his work easier. He could clean without people bothering him. He could think his own thoughts while he worked. But sometimes late at night like this, the silence felt heavy. It reminded him of how alone he was in this place full of music. The conservatory was a beautiful building. It had been built over 100 years ago by rich people who loved music. The walls were made of dark wood that shined when Marcus polished it. Large paintings of famous musicians hung in gold frames. Crystal lights hung from the high ceilings. Everything about this place said important and expensive. Marcus knew every corner of this building. He knew which classrooms had the best pianos. He knew which practice rooms stayed warm in winter, and which ones got too hot in summer. He knew where students liked to hide when they wanted to skip class. He had learned all of this by watching and listening while he cleaned. The students who came here were different from the kids Marcus had grown up with in Detroit. These students had nice clothes and expensive instruments. Their parents drove fancy cars to drop them off. Many of them had been taking music lessons since they were very small children. They talked about going to famous music schools and playing in big concert halls someday. Marcus remembered being young and having those same dreams. But that felt like a lifetime ago now. Now he was 52 years old with gray hair and tired hands. His back hurt from bending over to mop floors. His knees ached from kneeling to scrub corners. Some mornings he looked in the mirror and wondered how he had ended up here. Tonight Marcus started his work in the main concert hall. This was his favorite room to clean. The hall had 500 red velvet seats that faced a big stage. On the stage sat a beautiful black piano. It was a Steinway grand piano worth more money than Marcus made in 3 years. He had looked it up online once. Marcus ran his cloth over each seat carefully. He picked up pieces of paper that students had dropped. He found pencils, hair ties, and candy wrappers. Young people always left things behind. As he worked, he looked up at the stage and the piano. In the dim light, it looked like a sleeping giant. He had watched many concerts from the back of this hall. When famous musicians came to play, Marcus would finish his work early and stand by the doors to listen. He told himself he was just making sure everything was clean and safe. But really, he came for the music. The music filled up the empty spaces inside him that his regular life could not touch. During the day, this hall was full of energy. Students practiced here for their big performances. Teachers gave lessons on the stage. The sound of music filled the air from morning until night. Piano music, violin music, singing voices. It all mixed together like a beautiful soup of sound. But now, in the quiet of night, Marcus could almost hear the echoes of all that music. It seemed to live in the walls and the ceiling. Sometimes he would stop cleaning just to listen to the silence. It was not really silent at all. It was full of invisible music. Marcus finished cleaning the concert hall and moved to the practice rooms. There were 20 small rooms where students came to practice alone. Each room had a piano and thick walls to keep the sound from bothering other people. These rooms were where the real work happened. This was where students spent hours playing the same pieces over and over until they got them right. As Marcus cleaned each practice room, he looked at the sheet music left on the piano stands. He could read music, though most people did not know this about him. He saw pieces by Mozart, Chopin, and Beethoven. He saw modern songs and jazz pieces too. Sometimes he would touch the keys very softly, just to hear the sound, but he was always careful not to make too much noise. In practice room 12, Marcus found something that made him stop. A student had left behind a piece of sheet music for Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. Marcus knew this piece well, very well. His grandmother had taught it to him when he was just 16 years old. He remembered her old hands showing him how to make the melody sing above the gentle left-hand pattern. Marcus picked up the sheet music and looked at it closely. The notes were like old friends he had not seen in a long time. He could hear the music in his head just by looking at the page. His fingers moved slightly as if they were playing the invisible keys of a ghost piano. For a moment, Marcus forgot where he was. He forgot about his cleaning cart and his tired back. He forgot about being invisible and ignored. He was just a musician looking at a beautiful piece of music. His heart beat faster as the melody played in his memory. Then he heard a door slam somewhere in the building. Marcus quickly put the sheet music back where he found it. He picked up his cleaning supplies and moved to the next room. The spell was broken. He was just the custodian again. But as Marcus continued his work that night, something had changed. The music he had seen and remembered stayed with him. It followed him from room to room like a friendly cat. For the first time in months, Marcus found himself humming quietly as he worked. The sound was so soft that even he could barely hear it, but it was there, keeping him company in the long, quiet hours of the night. When Marcus finally finished his work at 6 in the morning, the sun was starting to rise. Soon students and teachers would fill these halls again. The building would come alive with music and voices and the sound of footsteps on the polished floors. And Marcus would go home to his small apartment, invisible once again. Marcus sat on the bus going home from work, watching the city wake up through the dirty window. Office workers hurried down the sidewalks with coffee cups in their hands. Store owners lifted metal gates and turned on their lights. The world was starting a new day while Marcus was ending his. As the bus bumped along the rough streets, Marcus thought about the sheet music he had found. Chopin's Nocturne. It brought back so many memories. Memories of a different life. A life when music was not just something he heard at work, but something that lived inside him every day. Marcus had grown up in Detroit, in a neighborhood where most of the houses were old and needed paint. His family did not have much money, but they had something better. They had his grandmother, Rose Williams. Grandma Rose was a small woman with strong hands and a voice that could fill a church. She had been playing piano since she was 5 years old. The piano in Grandma Rose's living room was older than Marcus. It was a brown upright piano with keys that were yellow from age. Some of the keys stuck when you pressed them. A few of them did not make any sound at all. But to Marcus, it was the most beautiful instrument in the world. Marcus was 7 years old when Grandma Rose first lifted him onto the piano bench. His feet could not reach the floor. His small hands could barely stretch to reach 5 keys at once. But when he pressed down and heard the sound, something inside him woke up. It was like finding a part of himself he did not know was missing. "This boy has music in his bones," Grandma Rose told his mother. "I can feel it in the way he touches the keys." Every day after school, Marcus would run to his grandmother's house. She would be waiting for him with a glass of milk and a cookie. Then they would sit at the old piano together. Grandma Rose taught him how to read music like reading words in a book. She showed him how to make his fingers strong and quick. Most important, she taught him how to feel the music, not just play it. "Music is not about showing off," she would say. "Music is about telling the truth. When you play, you tell people things you cannot say with words." Marcus was a fast learner. By the time he was 10, he could play songs that impressed the adults at church. By 12, he was playing piano for the Sunday service sometimes. By 15, he was better than many people who had been playing much longer. But it was not easy growing up in their neighborhood. Marcus's father worked 2 jobs to pay the bills. His mother cleaned houses for rich families across town. Money was always tight. There were times when they had to choose between buying food or paying for the heat. Music lessons cost money they did not have. Grandma Rose taught Marcus everything she could. But she knew he needed more. He needed a real teacher. He needed to learn about the great composers and the difficult pieces they wrote. He needed to play on better pianos. Most of all, he needed to be around other serious musicians. When Marcus was 16, a miracle happened. A music teacher from the fancy part of town heard him play at a church concert. Her name was Mrs. Patterson, and she taught piano to rich kids whose parents could pay for the best. After Marcus finished playing that night, Mrs. Patterson came up to him. "Young man," she said, "you have a gift. A real gift. I would like to teach you if you are willing to work hard." Marcus could not believe it. Mrs. Patterson usually charged $50 for each lesson. That was more money than his family spent on food in a week. But she said she would teach him for free if he promised to practice every day and take it seriously. For 2 years, Marcus rode the bus across town twice a week for lessons with Mrs. Patterson. She had a beautiful house with 2 grand pianos in her music room. She taught him pieces by Chopin, Mozart, Beethoven, and Rachmaninoff. These were pieces he had only dreamed of playing. Mrs. Patterson pushed Marcus harder than anyone ever had. She made him play scales until his fingers hurt. She made him work on the same measure of music 50 times until he got it perfect. Sometimes Marcus wanted to quit, but then he would remember Grandma Rose's words about telling the truth through music. By his senior year of high school, Marcus was playing at a level that amazed everyone who heard him. Mrs. Patterson said he was ready for college. Not just any college, but one of the best music schools in the country. She helped him make a recording to send with his applications. The letter came on a Tuesday in March. Marcus was accepted to the Chicago Institute of Music with a full scholarship. Full scholarship meant they would pay for everything: his classes, his room, his food, even his books. All he had to do was keep playing piano and keep his grades up. Marcus had never been so happy in his life. Grandma Rose cried when he told her. His parents hugged him so tight he could barely breathe. Mrs. Patterson said she was proud of him. For the first time, Marcus could see his future clearly. He would study music. He would become a real pianist. Maybe someday he would play in concert halls like the ones he had only seen in pictures. But then everything changed. It happened in May, just 2 months before Marcus was supposed to start college. His father was working late at the factory where he fixed machines. There was an accident. A heavy piece of equipment fell and crushed his father's legs. The doctor said he would never walk normally again. Suddenly, the family had no money coming in. His father's job was gone. The medical bills were huge. His mother tried to work more hours cleaning houses, but it was not enough. They were going to lose their house. Marcus sat in the hospital waiting room the night after his father's accident. He held the letter from the Chicago Institute of Music in his hands. The paper was wrinkled from him reading it so many times. The words seemed to blur together as tears filled his eyes. He knew what he had to do, but knowing it did not make it easier. The next morning, Marcus called the school and told them he could not come. He got a job at a grocery store during the day and another job cleaning offices at night. The money he made helped his family keep their house and pay the bills. Grandma Rose tried to talk him out of it. "Your music is too important," she said. "We will find another way." But there was no other way. Marcus had to choose between his dreams and his family. He chose his family. Years passed. Marcus kept working, sending money home every month. His father learned to walk with a cane but never worked again. His mother got older and more tired. Grandma Rose got sick and died when Marcus was 25. At her funeral, Marcus played her favorite hymn on the old piano one last time. After that, Marcus did not play much anymore. It hurt too much to remember what he had given up. He moved from job to job, always telling himself that someday he would go back to music, someday when things were better. Someday when he had saved enough money, but someday never came. Years turned into decades. Marcus's hands got rough from working. His back got bent from bending over. His dreams got buried under bills and responsibilities and the weight of everyday life. Now at 52, Marcus was just the night custodian at a music school. He was surrounded by young people living the dream he had given up. Every day he saw what his life might have been. Every day he cleaned up after people who had the chances he never got. But sometimes late at night when the building was empty and quiet, Marcus could still hear Grandma Rose's voice. "Music is about telling the truth," she had said. "When you play, you tell people things you cannot say with words." The truth was that Marcus had never stopped being a musician inside. He had just stopped playing the music out loud. It started by accident 3 years ago. Marcus was cleaning practice room 7 when he noticed something strange. One of the keys on the piano was making a buzzing sound. As the custodian, it was his job to report broken things to the maintenance office. But first, he needed to check which key was causing the problem. Marcus sat down on the piano bench and pressed each key slowly. C, C sharp, D, D sharp. When he got to the F above middle C, he heard the buzz. He pressed it again to make sure. Yes, that was the problem key. He would write it down in his report. But as Marcus sat there with his finger on the F key, something strange happened. His other fingers moved to other keys without him thinking about it. Before he knew what he was doing, he was playing a simple melody. Just a few notes, but they sounded clear and sweet in the small room. Marcus stopped playing immediately. He looked around to make sure no one had heard him. The building was empty, just like always during his night shift. Still, his heart was beating fast. He was not supposed to be playing the pianos. He was just supposed to clean them. That night, Marcus could not stop thinking about those few notes he had played. They had felt so natural under his fingers, so right. It was like riding a bicycle after years of walking. The muscles remembered even when the mind tried to forget. The next week, Marcus found himself back in practice room 7. This time, he was not there to fix anything. He told himself he was just checking to make sure the room was clean. But really, he wanted to touch the piano keys again. He sat down on the bench and looked at his hands. They were rougher now than when he was young. His fingernails were short and clean, but not polished like a real pianist's. These were working hands. Hands that held mops and brooms, not hands that made beautiful music. But when Marcus placed his fingers on the keys, something magical happened. The years fell away. His hands remembered what to do. They remembered the scales Grandma Rose had taught him. They remembered the gentle touch Mrs. Patterson had shown him. They remembered how to make the piano sing. Marcus played softly that night. Just simple songs at first. A hymn his grandmother loved. A folk song his mother used to hum. Nothing too difficult. Nothing that would make too much noise. But even these simple songs felt like coming home after a long trip. From that night on, Marcus began visiting practice room 7 during his cleaning rounds. He was always careful. He would make sure the whole building was empty first. He would lock the main doors so no one could come in without him knowing. He would keep his playing quiet so the sound would not carry to the street. At first, Marcus only played for a few minutes each night. His fingers were stiff from years of not playing. His back hurt from sitting on the piano bench. But slowly, night by night, his body remembered how to be a musician. After a month, Marcus was playing for 30 minutes during each shift. He started with easy pieces to warm up his fingers. Then he would work on something more challenging. His muscle memory was stronger than he had expected. Pieces he had learned 25 years ago came back to him like old friends returning from a long journey. Practice room 7 became Marcus's secret world. During the day, it was just another small room where rich kids learned to play piano. But at night, it belonged to him. It was the place where he could remember who he used to be, the place where he could dream about who he might have become. Marcus discovered that the piano in room 7 was special. It was a Steinway baby grand, smaller than the concert piano on the main stage, but still worth more money than Marcus made in 2 years. The touch was perfect. Each key responded exactly the way he wanted it to. The sound was warm and rich like honey mixed with gold. He began to explore the music library in the school. Students and teachers left sheet music everywhere, on piano benches, in practice rooms, stuck in books on shelves. Marcus would borrow pieces for a night, photocopy them quickly in the office, and return the originals before anyone noticed they were gone. Soon, Marcus had built his own secret collection of music. He kept the photocopies in a folder hidden in his cleaning cart. Chopin nocturnes, Bach inventions, Mozart sonatas, Beethoven symphonies arranged for piano, even some jazz pieces and modern songs. He was like a hungry man who had found a feast. The more Marcus played, the more he remembered how much he loved music. Not just loved it, needed it. Music was like food for a part of his soul that had been starving for 25 years. Every night when he sat down at the piano, he felt more like himself than he did during the day. Marcus began to take bigger risks. He started playing louder, more emotional pieces. He worked on Chopin's Ballad No. 1, a piece that had always been difficult for him even when he was young. Night after night, he practiced the same challenging passages until his fingers could play them smoothly. He also began to improvise, making up music on the spot. This was something Grandma Rose had taught him when he was small. "Do not just play other people's songs," she used to say. "Play your own songs too. Play what is in your heart." Marcus's improvisations were different now than when he was young. They were sadder but also deeper. They told the story of a man who had given up his dreams but never stopped dreaming. They spoke of loneliness and hard work and the weight of years. But they also spoke of hope that refused to die. Sometimes Marcus would play the same improvised melody for weeks, adding to it and changing it each night. It was like writing a musical diary of his thoughts and feelings. These pieces belonged only to him. No one else would ever hear them. As months passed, Marcus grew bolder. He began to explore other practice rooms, discovering that each piano had its own personality. The piano in room 12 had a bright, clear sound perfect for Mozart. The one in room 3 was deeper and richer, ideal for Beethoven. The piano in room 18 had a slightly jazzy tone that made everything sound a little bluesy, but room 7 remained his favorite. It was where he had rediscovered his love for music. It was where he felt most comfortable, most himself. Some nights he would just sit at that piano for an hour, playing everything from classical masterpieces to songs he remembered from his childhood. Marcus knew what he was doing was risky. If someone caught him, he would probably lose his job. Custodians were not supposed to use the school's expensive instruments. They were supposed to clean and leave. But Marcus could not stop himself. The music was like a drug, and he was addicted. He developed a system to keep his secret safe. He learned the schedule of the security guard who did rounds 3 times during the night. He figured out which rooms had windows facing the street and which ones were completely hidden. He even learned to play certain pieces by memory in complete darkness, so he would not have to turn on the lights. The strangest part was how natural it felt. When Marcus sat at the piano, he was not the tired custodian with the sore back and the gray hair. He was the young musician he used to be. His fingers moved with confidence and grace. His body swayed with the rhythm. His face relaxed into an expression of pure joy. Music had always been Marcus's first language. English was what he spoke to get by in the world, but music was what he spoke to communicate with his soul. For 25 years he had been silent in his first language. Now finally, he was speaking it again. Every morning when Marcus finished his shift and locked up the building, he felt both satisfied and sad. Satisfied because he had spent time doing what he loved most. Sad because he had to leave it behind and return to the regular world where he was just the invisible custodian. But he always knew he would be back the next night. The piano in room 7 was waiting for him. The music was waiting for him. The part of himself that he had lost for so many years was waiting for him to come home. Dr. Sarah Chen had been the director of the Riverside Conservatory of Music for only 6 months, but she already knew the school was in serious trouble. She sat in her office on a gray Monday morning, looking at the financial reports spread across her desk. The numbers told a story she did not want to believe. Enrollment was down by 30% from 5 years ago. 3 major donors had pulled their funding in the past year. The building needed expensive repairs that the school could not afford. Worst of all, the board of trustees was losing patience. They had given her an ultimatum: raise $500,000 in 3 months, or they would close the school permanently. Dr. Chen was only 38 years old, but she felt much older as she stared at these problems. She had left her comfortable job as a music professor in California to come here. She believed in this school. She believed in the importance of music education. But believing was not enough to pay the bills. The conservatory had been founded in 1923 by a wealthy businessman who loved classical music. For decades, it had been one of the most respected music schools in the region. Famous musicians had studied here. Important concerts had been performed on its stages. But times had changed. Young people today were more interested in technology than classical music. Parents worried that a music degree would not lead to a good job. Other schools offered newer programs and better facilities. Slowly, the conservatory had been losing students to its competitors. Dr. Chen had tried many things to turn the situation around. She had started new programs in music technology and popular music. She had reached out to local businesses for sponsorships. She had applied for grants from arts foundations. But nothing had brought in enough money to solve the crisis. The board meeting last Friday had been brutal. Mr. Richardson, the chairman, had made it clear that this was the school's last chance. "We cannot keep throwing good money after bad," he had said. "If you cannot prove this school can be financially stable, we will have to cut our losses." Dr. Chen understood their position. Most of the board members were successful business people who had donated money to the school over the years. They loved music, but they also understood that a school needed to make financial sense to survive. They had already invested millions of dollars trying to keep the conservatory alive. As Dr. Chen looked out her office window at the students walking across the courtyard, she felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. These young people had come here to follow their dreams of becoming musicians. Their parents had paid tuition believing their children would get a good education. The teachers had dedicated their lives to this institution. She could not let them all down. That afternoon, Dr. Chen called a meeting with her senior staff. Professor Martinez, who taught piano, had been at the school for 20 years. Dr. Williams, the head of the voice department, had been there even longer. Ms. Thompson, who managed student affairs, knew every family that had ever sent a child to the school. "We need to do something big," Dr. Chen told them. "Something that will get the attention of major donors and show them what this school can do." Professor Martinez suggested, organizing a concert featuring all their best students. Dr. Williams thought they should invite famous alumni to come back and perform. Ms. Thompson wondered if they could create some kind of special event that would appeal to wealthy patrons. After hours of discussion, they decided to organize a showcase evening for potential donors. They would invite the richest and most influential people in the city. There would be elegant food, expensive wine, and most importantly, a concert that would demonstrate the incredible talent at the conservatory. "We need to show them that supporting this school is not charity," Dr. Chen explained. "We need to prove that we are producing world-class musicians who will bring honor to our city for years to come." The plan was ambitious. They would hold the event in the main concert hall. They would hire the best catering company in town. They would send invitations to everyone on their lists of potential donors. The evening would cost more money than the school could afford, but it was their only hope. The most important part of the plan was choosing the right student to perform. This person would represent everything the school stood for. They needed someone with extraordinary talent who could move people to open their wallets and write big checks. After much debate, they chose Michael Harrison, a 20-year-old piano student who had won several competitions. Michael was handsome, charming, and incredibly gifted. He had already been accepted to graduate school at one of the most prestigious music programs in the country. He was exactly the kind of success story they needed to showcase. Michael agreed to perform Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 with a small orchestra made up of faculty members. It was a piece that always impressed audiences, full of passion and technical brilliance. Michael had performed it before and knew it well. For weeks, everyone at the school worked to prepare for the showcase evening. Dr. Chen wrote personal letters to potential donors. The maintenance staff polished every surface in the concert hall until it gleamed. The music faculty rehearsed with Michael to make sure the performance would be perfect. Marcus watched all this preparation from the shadows. As the custodian, he was invisible to most of the planning. But he saw everything. He saw Dr. Chen working late into the night, making phone calls and writing letters. He saw teachers staying after hours to rehearse. He saw students practicing extra hours because they knew their school's future was at stake. Marcus had worked at the conservatory long enough to understand what was happening. He had seen other small schools close down. He knew how hard it was to keep a music program alive when people did not think music was important anymore. In his heart, he hoped the showcase would be successful. This place had become his second home, even if no one really noticed him. 3 weeks before the showcase, disaster struck. Michael Harrison collapsed during a rehearsal. He was rushed to the hospital, where doctors discovered he had pneumonia. It was a serious case that would require weeks of rest and recovery. Michael would not be able to perform at the showcase. Dr. Chen felt like her world was falling apart. The invitations had already been sent. The caterers were booked. The donors were expecting to hear an amazing performance, but their star performer was in the hospital, too sick to even sit up in bed. The faculty held emergency meetings to find a replacement. They considered every advanced student in the school. Some were too young and inexperienced. Others were talented but not at Michael's level. A few could play difficult pieces but did not have the stage presence needed to impress wealthy donors. Professor Martinez suggested postponing the event, but Dr. Chen knew that was impossible. They had spent too much money already. More importantly, the board had given them a deadline. There was no time to reschedule and start over. As the days passed, panic set in. Dr. Chen barely slept. Professor Martinez called in favors from other schools, trying to find a guest performer who could step in at the last minute. Dr. Williams suggested changing the program entirely, perhaps featuring the vocal students instead of piano. But none of these solutions felt right. The showcase was supposed to demonstrate the school's commitment to excellence. Settling for a second-choice performer or changing the entire program would send the wrong message to the donors they desperately needed to impress. Marcus watched all this chaos unfold during his night shifts. He saw the lights burning late in Dr. Chen's office. He found tissues in wastebaskets that suggested people had been crying. He overheard worried conversations between teachers who were afraid they might lose their jobs. One night, as Marcus was emptying the trash in Professor Martinez's office, he found a program from the showcase that had been thrown away. It still showed Michael Harrison as the featured performer, playing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. Marcus knew this piece well. Very well. He had been working on it during his secret practice sessions in Room 7. As Marcus held the crumpled program in his hands, a crazy thought entered his mind. He knew he could play this piece. He'd been practicing it for months, perfecting every passage, feeling every emotion the composer had written into the music. But he was just the custodian. No one even knew he could play piano. Marcus threw the program back in the trash and continued his work. But the crazy thought would not go away. It followed him from room to room as he cleaned. It whispered in his ear as he mopped the floors. It grew louder and more insistent as the night went on. By morning, Marcus realized that he might be the only person at the school who could save the showcase. The only person who could save the school itself. But would anyone listen to the invisible custodian? And even if they did, would they trust him with something so important? Marcus did not know the answers to these questions. But he knew one thing for certain: time was running out and someone had to do something soon. Dr. Sarah Chen rubbed her tired eyes and looked at the clock on her office wall. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night, 3 days before the showcase. She had been working for 14 hours straight, making last-minute phone calls to anyone who might be able to help. So far, she had found no solution to their problem. Every pianist she had contacted was either unavailable or not skilled enough to perform Rachmaninoff's concerto with only 3 days' notice. Some had suggested simpler pieces, but Dr. Chen knew that would not work. The donors expected excellence. They expected to be amazed. A simple piece played well would not be enough to open their checkbooks. Dr. Chen gathered the papers from her desk and put them in her briefcase. She had forgotten her reading glasses earlier and needed to take work home with her. As she walked through the empty hallways toward the exit, her footsteps echoed in the silence. The building felt heavy with worry and fear. She was almost to the main door when she heard something that made her stop. Music was coming from somewhere inside the building. Piano music. But that was impossible. The building was supposed to be empty except for Marcus, the night custodian, and he would be cleaning, not playing piano. Dr. Chen stood still and listened carefully. The music was real. Someone was playing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, the exact piece they needed for the showcase. But more than that, whoever was playing it was performing it beautifully. The technique was flawless. The emotion was deep and moving. This was not a student practicing. This was a master musician. Following the sound, Dr. Chen walked quietly down the hallway toward the practice rooms. The music grew louder as she got closer. It was coming from practice room 7. The door was slightly open and warm light spilled into the hallway. Dr. Chen moved carefully to the doorway and looked inside. What she saw took her breath away. Marcus Williams, the night custodian, was sitting at the piano bench. His cleaning cart was pushed against the wall. His work gloves were folded neatly on top of the piano. His eyes were closed as his hands moved across the keys with the grace and skill of a concert pianist. Dr. Chen had heard many students play this piece over the years. She had heard professional musicians perform it in concert halls, but she had never heard it played with such raw emotion and perfect technique at the same time. Marcus was not just playing the notes. He was speaking directly to her soul through the music. The piece he was performing was the most challenging part of the concerto, the section where the piano and orchestra would normally play together in a complex musical conversation. But Marcus was playing both parts somehow, his left hand carrying the orchestral melody while his right hand danced through the piano's intricate passages. Dr. Chen found herself holding her breath. She was afraid that if she made any sound, this magical moment would disappear. She watched Marcus's face as he played. All the tiredness and worry she usually saw there was gone. In its place was pure joy and complete concentration. This was a man who belonged at a piano. The music built to a powerful climax, then settled into the gentle, heartbreaking melody that made this concerto famous. Marcus played this section with such tenderness that Dr. Chen felt tears forming in her eyes. She had forgotten how beautiful music could be when it was played by someone who truly understood it. As the piece came to an end, Marcus opened his eyes and saw Dr. Chen standing in the doorway. The expression on his face changed instantly from joy to panic. He jumped up from the piano bench so quickly that it almost fell over. "Dr. Chen, I'm so sorry. I know I shouldn't be. I'll pack up my things right away." Marcus rushed to his cleaning cart and began gathering his supplies with shaking hands. "Wait," Dr. Chen said softly. "Please don't go." Marcus stopped moving but did not look at her. He stood with his back turned, probably expecting to be fired on the spot. "That was beautiful," Dr. Chen said. "That was the most beautiful performance of that piece I have ever heard. How long have you been playing piano?" Marcus still would not turn around. "I'm sorry, Dr. Chen. I know custodians aren't supposed to use the instruments. Sometimes I can't help myself. The music, it calls to me." Dr. Chen walked into the room and closed the door behind her. She sat down in the chair next to the piano, the same chair where teachers usually sat when giving lessons. "Marcus, please sit down. I'm not angry. I'm amazed." Slowly, Marcus turned around and sat on the edge of the piano bench. He looked like a child who had been caught doing something wrong, even though what he had been caught doing was creating something beautiful. "I started learning when I was 7, Marcus said quietly. "My grandmother taught me. Then I had a real teacher in high school. I was supposed to go to music school, but—" His voice trailed off. "But what happened?" Dr. Chen asked gently. Marcus told her the whole story. About his grandmother and the old piano with broken keys. About Mrs. Patterson and the scholarship to Chicago. About his father's accident and the choice he had to make between his dreams and his family. About 25 years of working jobs that paid the bills but never fed his soul. "I've been practicing here at night for about 3 years, Marcus admitted. "I know I shouldn't have, but I missed music so much. This room became like a sanctuary for me, a place where I could remember who I used to be." Dr. Chen listened to every word. As Marcus talked, she began to understand that she was not just looking at a custodian who happened to play piano. She was looking at a real musician who had been forced to hide his talent for most of his adult life. "Marcus," she said, "how well do you know Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2? "Very well," Marcus replied. "I've been working on it for months. It's one of my favorite pieces. When I was young, I dreamed of playing it in a real concert hall someday." Dr. Chen's heart began to beat faster. Could this be the answer to their problem? Could the solution to their crisis have been working in their building all along? "Would you play it again?" she asked. "The whole piece from the beginning?" Marcus looked surprised. "You want me to play more? I want to hear everything you can do." For the next hour, Marcus played piece after piece while Dr. Chen listened in wonder. He performed sections of the Rachmaninoff concerto that she had never heard played so beautifully by a student. He played Chopin nocturnes that brought tears to her eyes. He even improvised a jazz version of a Mozart sonata that made her laugh with delight. Everything Marcus played was performed at a professional level. His technique was flawless. His musical understanding was deep and mature. Most importantly, he had something that could not be taught: the ability to communicate pure emotion through music. "Marcus," Dr. Chen said when he finished playing, "I have a question for you, and I want you to think carefully before you answer." Marcus nodded, still looking nervous. "Our showcase is in 3 days. Our pianist is sick and cannot perform. We need someone to play Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 in front of 300 of the most important people in the city. The future of this school depends on that performance being extraordinary." Dr. Chen paused and looked directly into Marcus's eyes. "Would you consider performing at the showcase?" Marcus stared at her for a long moment. The room was completely silent except for the sound of their breathing. "You want me to perform?" he finally said. "In front of all those people? But I'm just the custodian." "No," Dr. Chen said firmly. "You're not just the custodian. You're one of the most gifted pianists I have ever heard. Those people need to hear what you can do. This school needs them to hear what you can do." Marcus shook his head slowly. "I don't think I can do that. Those people, they're expecting a real musician, a young student with a bright future, not a 52-year-old man who mops floors for a living." "Marcus," Dr. Chen said, "talent has no age limit. Music has no job description. What I heard tonight was real. It was honest. It was exactly what those people need to hear if we're going to save this school." She could see that Marcus was thinking about it, even though he was scared. "I'm not asking you to decide right now," she continued, "but will you at least think about it? Will you consider that maybe this is why you've been practicing in this room for 3 years? Maybe this is why you never really stopped being a musician, even when life forced you to do other things. Marcus looked at the piano, then back at Dr. Chen. If I said yes, he said quietly, and if I failed, I would ruin everything for the school. And if you said yes and succeeded, Dr. Chen replied, you might save everything for the school, including yourself. Marcus did not sleep that night. He lay in his small apartment staring at the ceiling and thinking about Dr. Chen's question. Every time he closed his eyes, he could see himself sitting at the grand piano on the main stage, with hundreds of rich, important people watching him. The thought made his stomach feel sick with fear. Who was he to think he could perform for people like that? He was Marcus Williams, the custodian. He wore a uniform with his name sewn on the pocket. He had calluses on his hands from years of hard work. He lived in a tiny apartment and rode the bus to work every day. These were not the hands or the life of a concert pianist, but then Marcus would remember how the music had felt under his fingers the night before. How right it had seemed, how alive he had felt while playing. For those moments in practice room 7, he had not been the custodian at all. He had been the musician he was born to be. The next morning, Marcus arrived at work early. Dr. Chen had left him a note saying she would not pressure him for an answer, but she hoped he would at least come to her office to talk more about the possibility. The note was kind, but Marcus could hear the desperation behind the words. The school was running out of time. Marcus spent the day doing his regular cleaning duties, but his mind was somewhere else. Every time he passed the main concert hall, he looked through the open doors at the stage. The grand piano sat there like a beautiful, terrifying mountain he was being asked to climb. During his lunch break, Marcus walked to the small park across from the conservatory.
He sat on a bench and called his mother, something he did every few weeks.
She was 78 now and lived in a senior apartment building back in Detroit. You sound different today, she said, after they had talked for a few minutes. Something's on your mind. Marcus had not planned to tell her about Dr. Chen's offer, but somehow the whole story came out. His mother listened without interrupting, the way she always had when he was a child with problems to solve. What do you think Grandma Rose would say? His mother asked when he finished. Marcus smiled for the first time all day. She would say, I'm thinking too much and feeling too little. That sounds right, his mother agreed. She always said you played best when you stopped worrying about what other people thought and just let the music speak. But Mom, these people, they're expecting a real musician. Not someone like me? Someone like you? His mother's voice got stern. Marcus Williams, you are a real musician. You always have been. The fact that life made you do other jobs doesn't change what you are in your heart. After the phone call, Marcus felt a little stronger, but he was still scared. That afternoon, he found Dr. Chen in her office and agreed to meet with her after the building closed to discuss the details. At 10 o'clock that night, Marcus knocked on Dr. Chen's office door. She had coffee waiting and had brought Professor Martinez with her. Professor Martinez was the head of the piano department and had been at the school for 20 years. Dr. Chen played me a recording she made of your performance last night, Professor Martinez said as soon as Marcus sat down. I have never heard a student play Rachmaninoff with such maturity and understanding. Where did you study? Marcus told his story again. Professor Martinez listened with growing amazement. You've had no formal training since high school? No master classes? No performance experience?
And you can play like that?
I've been practicing, Marcus said simply. Every night for 3 years, and before that, just in my memory. Music is something I've never been able to let go of completely. Dr. Chen spread papers across her desk. If you agree to do this, we need to work out the details. The performance is in 2 days. We've already told the donors that there will be a special guest performer. We haven't said who it is. What would you tell them about me? Marcus asked. Professor Martinez leaned forward. We tell them the truth. You're a self-taught musician with extraordinary natural talent. You work here at the school and have been practicing in secret. Your story is actually perfect for what we're trying to do. What do you mean? Dr. Chen explained. These donors need to understand that music education isn't just for rich kids who can afford expensive lessons. They need to see that musical talent exists everywhere, even in places they don't expect. Your story proves that this school serves a real purpose in the community. Marcus thought about this. You want to use my story to show them that the school is important? We want to use your talent to show them that the school is important, Professor Martinez corrected. Your story just makes it even more powerful. They spent the next hour talking about the practical details. Marcus would perform the first movement of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, accompanied by a small ensemble of faculty members. Dr. Chen would introduce him with a brief explanation of his background. The performance would be the highlight of the evening, right before they asked for donations. I have to ask, Professor Martinez said, are you sure you can handle the pressure? Playing for 300 people is very different from playing alone in a practice room. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I've been performing my whole life, he finally said. Every Sunday at church when I was young. For my grandmother's friends. For Mrs. Patterson's recitals. I know how to play for people. I just haven't done it in a long time. There's something else we need to discuss, Dr. Chen said carefully. If you do this and if the performance goes well, your life is going to change. People will want to know more about you. There might be newspaper articles, maybe even television interviews. Are you prepared for that? Marcus had not thought about this possibility. The idea of being famous, even locally, seemed impossible. I just want to help save the school, he said. I don't need anything else. But you might get something else whether you want it or not, Professor Martinez said. If you perform at the level I heard on that recording, people are going to take notice. Good things could happen for you. Dr. Chen pulled out a contract. This is just a formality, but we need to make it official. You would be paid the same fee we were going to pay Michael Harrison. It's not a huge amount, but it's something. Marcus looked at the number on the contract. It was more money than he made in 2 months of custodial work. But that was not why he was considering this. The money was nice, but it was not the point. Can I ask you something? Marcus said. Why are you willing to take such a big risk on me? If I fail, it could hurt the school even more. Dr. Chen and Professor Martinez exchanged glances. Marcus, Dr. Chen said, we've tried everything else. We've planned this event perfectly, but we need something special to make it work. When I heard you play last night, I knew I was listening to something special, something real. Music always tells the truth, Professor Martinez added. When you played, I could hear the truth in every note. That's what we need these donors to hear. Marcus looked at the contract again. His whole life could change with one signature. After 52 years of being invisible, he could become visible in a way he had never imagined. What if I'm not good enough? He asked quietly. What if you are? Dr. Chen replied. Marcus picked up the pen. His hand was shaking slightly as he signed his name at the bottom of the contract. When he finished, he looked up at Dr. Chen and Professor Martinez. I hope you know what you're doing, he said. We hope you know what you're doing, Dr. Chen said with a smile. Because in 48 hours, you're going to be performing for the most important audience of your life. That night, Marcus did not go to practice room 7 instead. Dr. Chen gave him a key to the main concert hall. For the first time in 7 years, Marcus walked onto that stage as a musician, not a custodian. He sat at the grand piano and played his piece under the bright stage lights. The sound was bigger and richer than any piano he had ever played. The acoustics of the hall made every note ring with perfect clarity. As Marcus played, he tried to imagine 300 people sitting in those red velvet seats, listening to his music. The thought still scared him. But underneath the fear, something else was growing. Excitement. After 25 years of silence, Marcus Williams was going to make music for the world to hear. And maybe, just maybe, that music would save the place that had given him back his dreams. The day of the showcase arrived gray and cold. Marcus woke up at 3 in the afternoon after sleeping for only 2 hours. His stomach felt like it was full of butterflies doing somersaults. He had practiced the piece hundreds of times over the past 2 days, but now he could barely remember how it started. Marcus showered and put on the only suit he owned. It was black and 10 years old, but Dr. Chen had told him it looked perfect for the performance. She had also arranged for a professional pianist's shirt and bow tie. When Marcus looked at himself in the mirror, he almost did not recognize the man staring back at him. At 5 o'clock, Marcus arrived at the conservatory. The building looked completely different from how he had ever seen it. Elegant cars were dropping off well-dressed people at the front entrance. Workers were carrying in flowers and expensive-looking food. White tablecloths covered tables that had been set up in the lobby for the reception. Marcus used the staff entrance to avoid the arriving guests. His hands were shaking as he walked through the hallways he knew so well. Everything looked the same, but it felt completely different. Tonight he was not the invisible custodian. Tonight he was the featured performer. Dr. Chen met him backstage in the green room behind the concert hall. She looked nervous too, but she smiled when she saw him. "You look wonderful," she said. "How are you feeling?" "Terrified," Marcus answered honestly. "Good," Dr. Chen said. "Every great performer feels terrified before a big performance. It means you understand how important this is." Professor Martinez came in carrying sheet music. "We just finished our final rehearsal with the ensemble," he said. "Everyone is excited to play with you. They're all amazed by your talent." Through the thin walls, Marcus could hear the sound of people talking and laughing in the lobby. The reception had started. In 1 hour, those people would be sitting in the concert hall expecting to be entertained and impressed. "Who's out there?" Marcus asked. Dr. Chen consulted her list. "The mayor is here, several city council members, the heads of the 3 biggest banks in town, the family that owns the newspaper, art collectors, business owners, retired professors, all the people we need to convince that this school is worth saving." Marcus felt his chest getting tight. These were the most powerful people in the city. People who lived in mansions and drove expensive cars. People who had never worried about paying rent or buying groceries. What could someone like him possibly have to say to people like that? "I don't think I can do this," Marcus said suddenly. "These people, they're going to take one look at me and know I don't belong here." Dr. Chen sat down next to him. "Marcus, do you remember what you told me about your grandmother? About how she said music was about telling the truth?" Marcus nodded. "Well, here's the truth. Those people out there have everything money can buy. But most of them have never heard music played with the kind of honesty and emotion that you bring to it. They need to hear what you have to say even if they don't know it yet." Professor Martinez added, "I've been teaching piano for 20 years. I've heard thousands of students play. But when I heard your recording, I got goosebumps. That doesn't happen very often anymore." At 7 o'clock, the reception ended and the guests moved into the concert hall. Marcus watched from the side of the stage as 300 people in expensive clothes took their seats. The men wore dark suits and gold watches. The women wore jewelry that sparkled under the lights. Everyone looked important and successful. Dr. Chen walked onto the stage to welcome the guests. She thanked them for coming and explained how important their support was to the school's future. She talked about the conservatory's history and its mission to bring music education to the community. "Tonight," she said, "we want to share with you something very special, something that shows why this school matters not just to the students who study here, but to our entire city." Marcus stood in the wings, listening to Dr. Chen's introduction. His heart was beating so fast he thought it might explode. In 2 minutes, he would walk onto that stage. In 3 minutes, he would sit at the piano. In 4 minutes, he would start playing the most important performance of his life. "Music has the power to surprise us," Dr. Chen continued. "It can come from places we don't expect. It can touch us in ways we never imagined. Tonight's performer is someone who proves that talent and dedication can flourish anywhere, even in the most unlikely circumstances." Marcus could hear murmurs from the audience. They were curious now, wondering who this mysterious performer could be. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Chen said, "please welcome Mr. Marcus Williams." Marcus walked onto the stage. The bright lights made it impossible to see most of the audience, but he could sense their presence. 300 pairs of eyes watching him. 300 people waiting to judge whether he was worth their time and money. As Marcus approached the piano, he heard whispers from the crowd. He could not make out the words, but he could guess what people were saying. Who was this middle-aged black man in the old suit? Where had he come from? Why had they never heard of him before? Marcus sat at the piano bench and adjusted his position. The beautiful Steinway grand piano stretched out before him like an old friend. He placed his fingers on the keys and felt their familiar smoothness. For a moment, all the fear and nervousness faded away. This was home. This was where he belonged. But then Marcus made the mistake of looking out at the audience. In the front row, he could see several people checking their phones. A woman was whispering to her husband with a skeptical expression on her face. A man in an expensive suit was looking at his watch as if he had somewhere more important to be. Marcus felt his confidence crumble. These people had not come to hear an unknown custodian play piano. They had come expecting a polished young student with an impressive background. They were probably wondering if this was some kind of joke. The silence in the hall stretched on. Marcus knew he needed to start playing, but his hands felt frozen on the keys. All those years of dreaming about performing in a real concert hall. And now that the moment was here, he could not make himself begin. Then, from somewhere in the back of his mind, Marcus heard his grandmother's voice. Music is not about showing off, she had said all those years ago. Music is about telling the truth. When you play, you tell people things you cannot say with words. Marcus closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He thought about everything that had brought him to this moment. The little boy learning to play on a broken piano. The teenager who had practiced for hours every day. The young man who had given up his dreams to take care of his family. The custodian who had found his way back to music in the quiet of the night. All of that was true. All of that was his story. And if these people did not like his story, that was their problem, not his. Marcus opened his eyes and began to play. The first notes of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 filled the concert hall. The sound was rich and warm, flowing from the piano like water from a mountain spring. Marcus felt his fear melt away as the music took over. The audience stopped whispering. The woman in the front row stopped talking to her husband. The man with the expensive suit stopped looking at his watch. One by one, 300 people fell under the spell of Marcus's music. This was not just a performance. This was a man telling his life story through the language he spoke best. Every note carried the weight of dreams deferred but never forgotten. Every phrase spoke of hope that had survived 25 years of silence. As the music built to its first climax, Marcus felt something he had not experienced since he was young. He felt the audience leaning forward in their seats, drawn into the world he was creating. He could sense their surprise turning to amazement, their skepticism melting into wonder. For the first time in his life, Marcus Williams was not invisible. He was seen, heard, and understood, and the music he was sharing with the world was saying everything he had never been able to put into words. As Marcus played the opening movement of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, something magical happened in the concert hall. The music seemed to wrap around every person in the audience like a warm blanket on a cold night. People who had come expecting a pleasant but forgettable evening found themselves experiencing something they would remember for the rest of their lives. Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell, the widow of a steel company owner, sat in the third row with tears streaming down her cheeks. She had heard this piece performed dozens of times in concert halls around the world, but never with such raw emotion. The music was telling her a story about struggle and hope that reminded her of her own immigrant grandparents who had worked in factories to give their children better lives. In the balcony, Mayor Davidson leaned forward in his seat, completely forgetting about the political dinner he was supposed to attend after this event. He had come to the showcase because Dr. Chen had asked him to, and because he felt obligated to support the arts in his city. But now he was genuinely moved by what he was hearing. This was not just beautiful music. This was proof that his city still had the power to nurture extraordinary talent. Marcus played the gentle second theme of the concerto with such tenderness that the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. His left hand carried the simple accompaniment while his right hand sang the melody with perfect phrasing. Every note was exactly where it needed to be. But more than that, every note had meaning. Dr. Chen stood in the wings, watching the audience's faces. She had gambled everything on this moment, and now she could see that the gamble was paying off. The skeptical expressions had been replaced by wonder. The people checking their phones had put them away. Everyone in the hall was completely absorbed in Marcus's performance. Professor Martinez, who was conducting the small ensemble accompanying Marcus, had to fight back tears as he watched his musicians. They were playing better than they had in years, inspired by the extraordinary artist at the piano. The violinist, who had performed with symphony orchestras around the world, later said it was one of the most moving musical experiences of her career. As the piece moved into its dramatic development section, Marcus's technique was flawless. His fingers flew across the keys with the speed and accuracy of a master pianist, but technique alone did not explain what was happening in that hall. What made the performance special was the story Marcus was telling through the music. This was the story of a man who had been given a gift, but had been forced to hide it for most of his life. It was the story of dreams that had been buried but never died. It was the story of talent that had survived years of being ignored and forgotten. And now finally it was the story of those dreams being set free. In the audience, business executives who made million-dollar decisions every day found themselves thinking about the dreams they had given up when they were young. Artists who had stopped creating because it seemed impractical wondered if it was too late to start again. Parents thought about their children and the importance of nurturing whatever gifts they might have. Marcus reached the climax of the movement, where the piano and orchestra play together in a conversation of incredible complexity and beauty. His left hand thundered through the bass passages while his right hand danced through cascading runs of notes. The music filled every corner of the hall with sound that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than the instruments themselves. Then came the final section, where the main theme returns but transformed by everything that has come before. Marcus played this part with such gentle authority that grown men in the audience wiped their eyes without embarrassment. The music was saying goodbye to pain and hello to hope. It was saying that no matter how long dreams are buried, they can still grow when given the chance. As the last notes faded into silence, the hall remained completely quiet for several long seconds. It was as if no one wanted to break the spell that Marcus had created. Then slowly one person began to clap, then another, then another. Within moments, the entire audience was on their feet, applauding with an intensity that shook the building. The ovation went on for 5 minutes, then 10. People were cheering, whistling, and shouting "Bravo!" at the top of their voices. Many were crying openly. Marcus stood up from the piano bench, overwhelmed by the response. He had performed the piece perfectly, but he had never expected this kind of reaction. He bowed awkwardly, unsure of what to do with his hands. He was still, in his heart, the shy custodian who preferred to remain invisible. Dr. Chen walked onto the stage and gestured for the audience to quiet down. When they finally did, she put her arm around Marcus's shoulders. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "what you have just heard is why the Riverside Conservatory of Music exists. Mr. Marcus Williams has worked as our night custodian for 7 years. But as you can hear, he is so much more than that. He is a musician of extraordinary talent, who has been practicing in secret during his night shifts, keeping his love of music alive despite the challenges life has thrown at him." The audience murmured in amazement. The custodian? The man who cleaned their buildings and emptied their trash was capable of creating such beauty? Marcus represents what this school stands for, Dr. Chen continued. We believe that musical talent exists everywhere in our community. We believe that everyone deserves the chance to develop their gifts regardless of their background or circumstances. We believe that music has the power to transform lives, not just the lives of those who perform it, but the lives of those who hear it. Dr. Chen looked out at the audience. Marcus has shown us what is possible when talent meets opportunity, but he is not the only one. There are other young people in our community with gifts like his, waiting for their chance. The question is, will we give them that chance? What happened next exceeded Dr. Chen's wildest hopes. Before she could even ask for donations, people in the audience began standing up and pledging money. Mrs. Hartwell pledged $50,000. Mayor Davidson pledged $25,000 from the city's arts fund. The newspaper owner pledged $30,000 and promised to write an editorial supporting the school. Within 30 minutes, they had raised over $750,000, more than enough to save the school. But more than that, they had gained something even more valuable: a community of supporters who truly understood why the conservatory mattered. After the formal event ended, Marcus was surrounded by people wanting to congratulate him and learn more about his story. A talent agent gave him her business card. A recording company executive asked if he had ever considered making an album. The director of the city symphony invited him to audition as a soloist. But the conversation that meant the most to Marcus came from a 12-year-old girl whose grandmother had brought her to the showcase. "Mister," she said, looking up at him with wide eyes, "I want to play piano like you someday. Will you teach me?" Marcus knelt down to the girl's level. "What's your name?" he asked. "Destiny," she said. "Well, Destiny," Marcus said with a smile, "I think that can be arranged." 6 months later, Marcus Williams was no longer the night custodian at the Riverside Conservatory of Music. He was Professor Marcus Williams, teaching piano to students of all ages and backgrounds. The school had given him a full scholarship to complete his music degree, which he was pursuing part-time while teaching. Marcus still lived in the same small apartment and rode the same bus to work. But everything else about his life had changed. He performed regularly with the City Symphony. He had recorded an album of Chopin nocturnes that sold thousands of copies. Most importantly, he was helping other students discover their own musical voices. Dr. Chen often walked by Marcus's studio during his evening lessons. Through the open door, she could hear him working with students, using the same gentle patience his grandmother had shown him all those years ago. He was teaching them that music was not about showing off, but about telling the truth. The conservatory was thriving again. Enrollment was up. New donors supported the school every year. And in practice room 7, where Marcus had rediscovered his love of music, a small plaque hung on the wall. It read, "Music is not about showing off. Music is about telling the truth." Rose Williams. Late at night, when the building was quiet, Marcus sometimes returned to room 7 to practice. But now he was not alone. Students and teachers knew they could find him there, always willing to share his knowledge and passion with anyone who wanted to learn. The invisible man had become visible not through fame or fortune, but through the power of music to reveal the truth about who he really was. And in doing so, he had saved not only himself but an entire institution dedicated to nurturing the musical dreams of others. Marcus Williams had learned that it is never too late to become who you were meant to be. And sometimes, the most beautiful music comes from the most unexpected places, played by the most unlikely hands, speaking truths that can only be expressed through the universal language of song.